كما عقدنا جلسة مشاورات ومباحثات ثنائية فيما بعد، تأكيد أنه خلال لقاء الوزير مع سيادة الرئيس ومعي ثم اللقاء مع الوزراء العرب كان موضوع غزة هو الموضوع الرئيسي اللي استحوذ على معظم المشاورات التي تمت. ولكن أيضا خلال لقاء السيد الرئيس واللقاء معي تناولنا أهمية العلاقات المصرية الأمريكية، الطبيعة الاستراتيجية لهذه العلاقات، سياسية اقتصادية اجتماعية وثقافية، والاهتمام المتبادل لاستمرار الارتقاء بهذه العلاقة والعمل على تدعيمها لمواجهة التحديات المشتركة، والتقدير المتبادل بأن كلما توثقت العلاقات المصرية الأمريكية كان لها إسهامها في تحقيق الاستقرار والأمن على المستوى الإقليمي. ولكن عودة إلى قضية غزة، فكان في كل اللقاءات تركيز على الوضع الذي وصلت إليه الحرب في غزة، أهمية الوصول إلى وقف إطلاق نار، الإفراج عن الرهائن والمحتجزين، العمل على تكثيف حجم المساعدات الإنسانية لمواجهة وضع غير مسبوق، سواء من حيث تعرض المدنيين للتداعيات الخاصة بالحرب وفقد أرواح هذا الكم من المدنيين، حوالي 32,000 منهم حوالي 20,000 من النساء والأطفال، المعوقات التي تحول دون زيادة المساعدات، أهمية تناول القضايا الأوسع فيما يتعلق بالحقوق المشروعة للشعب الفلسطيني وإنهاء هذا الصراع على أساس حل الدولتين والمقررات الشرعية الدولية. ولكن بالتأكيد أنه مواجهة الحالة الحالية من استمرار الحرب، من المعاناة الإنسانية، حالة التجويع التي تتم، وأيضا الوضع في رفح. وضع في رفح الآن في حيز ضيق جدا، يوجد حوالي 1,400,000 فلسطيني تحت أوضاع معيشية صعبة من كل النواحي، ولابد أن يتم معالجة أي تداعيات إضافية، ضرورة عدم اتخاذ إسرائيل لأي عمليات عسكرية في هذه المنطقة المكتظة، لما سوف يترتب على ذلك من مزيد من الأعداد من الضحايا المدنيين، وأيضا ما قد يؤدي إليه من نزوح، وهي أمور المجتمع الدولي متفق بما فيها الولايات المتحدة على ضرورة تجنب هذه الفرضية.
Foreign Minister Shoukry and visiting U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Earlier in the day, Mr. Blinken met with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. They discussed a number of issues of mutual concern, and Gaza and the situation in Gaza topped the discussions. This is the live press conference here in Cairo, featuring the Egyptian top diplomats and the U.S. top diplomats. Speaking now is Foreign Minister Shoukry. The humanitarian situation in Gaza must be resolved seriously with specific measures. These are exceptional circumstances and we have to deal with it seriously. We welcome the U.S. Secretary of State here in Egypt, and we agree to continue our coordinations and consultations and to take effective measures to increase the humanitarian aid intended to reach Gaza, and we want our efforts to have an impact. There is no, we don't have the luxury to wait because the humanitarian situation is getting worse. We want to stop the war in Gaza. We want to reach a new stage in the region, away from the struggles, away from acts of revenge, a stage where a two-state solution and a Palestinian state on the borders of 1967 with East Jerusalem as its capital, two-state solution would be the aim, so as to reach stability and security in the region and as to benefit all of the peoples of the region. I now give the word to His Excellency,
Sammy, thank you
the U.S. Secretary of State.
And let me start by wishing all a blessed Ramadan. My friend Sammy also pointed out that it's Mother's Day for many in the region. So happy Mother's Day, and also thank you for reminding me to call my mother. We had very productive meetings today with President Sisi, with Foreign Minister Shoukry, as well as with our colleagues, and I'll come to that in a minute. Over the last 2 days, in my travels to the region, we've met intensively with virtually all of our regional partners, from Saudi Arabia, from Egypt, from Jordan, from the UAE, from Qatar, Palestinian Authority. But I very much appreciate the Foreign Minister hosting today's meeting with the Arab foreign ministers. I've been meeting and speaking individually to them over the past several weeks, but it was very good to be together, to have the opportunity to convene as a group, to share views on where we are, where we need to go, and how we can best get there. And there's a clear consensus around a number of shared priorities. First, the need for an immediate, sustained ceasefire with the release of hostages. That would create space to surge more humanitarian assistance to relieve the suffering of many people and to build something more enduring. We've been working, as you know, with Egypt, with Qatar, and with Israel to put a strong proposal on the table. Hamas responded to that. The negotiators continue to work. The gaps are narrowing, and we're continuing to push for an agreement in Doha. There's still difficult work to get there, but I continue to believe it's possible. The United States has also put forward the United Nations Security Council resolution to support these efforts, and we hope that all countries will back that resolution. Second, there's an agreement, as you heard from Minister Shoukry, on the urgent need to surge and sustain humanitarian assistance for the people of Gaza. Children should not be dying of malnutrition in Gaza or anywhere else for that matter. 100% of the population of Gaza is experiencing severe levels of acute food insecurity. We cannot, we must not allow that to continue. Now, the ceasefire that we're working on would be the best, most immediate way to enable us to surge humanitarian assistance, but it's not the only way. Regardless, we have to be doing that. We've seen some improvement over the last couple of weeks in getting humanitarian assistance to Palestinians, but it's not enough. And as I said, we need to really surge and sustain the assistance across land, across sea, and across air. We have senior officials meeting today in Cyprus to coordinate the international efforts on the maritime corridor. And that includes support for the U.S. military mission to construct a pier, a temporary pier, as an additional channel for aid. But as I said before, and I want to emphasize, this maritime corridor and this pier is a complement to, not a substitute for, other means of getting assistance to people who need it. And in particular, the land crossings are the most critical means of getting aid to those in need. As Minister Shoukry said, we agreed today, all of the ministers, that we would get our experts together in the coming days to identify the urgent, practical, and concrete steps that can and should be taken to increase the flow of assistance. Israel needs to do more. Tomorrow, I'll be talking to our partners about how to coordinate our efforts. As the Foreign Minister mentioned as well, we also discussed Rafah. We all share concerns. There are more than 1 million people in Rafah, many of whom were displaced from other parts of Gaza. A major ground operation there would mean more civilian deaths. It would worsen the humanitarian crisis. There is a better way to deal with the threat, the ongoing threat posed by Hamas. Third, we discussed and agreed on the need for long-term peace and security. This discussion very much consistent with the principles that I laid out in Tokyo many months ago, that Gaza cannot be used as a platform for terrorism. There can be no displacement of its population. There can be no reoccupation by Israel. And we also agreed that this requires a path to 2 states with real security guarantees for Israel. In turn, this also requires real reform of the Palestinian Authority. And we've seen some initial steps in that direction. More is needed. Revitalizing the PA with a better, more representative government, including Palestinians from Gaza, is critical to achieving the vision of a Gaza unified with the West Bank under Palestinian Authority. If and as the Palestinian Authority pursues reform, I'm also convinced that the region will strongly support it. Regional integration is one of the building blocks of lasting peace and lasting security. And that includes normalization for Israel with its neighbors. Yesterday I had an opportunity to meet again with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, as well as with Foreign Minister. And we had a very good discussion about the work that we've been doing for many months now on normalization, and that work is moving forward. We're continuing to make good progress. I believe we can reach an agreement which would present a historic opportunity for 2 nations, but also for the region as a whole. So I think if you look back on these past couple of months, since I was here in January, we have been working very closely together with our Arab partners on all of these post-conflict pieces. There's not only more consensus on the priorities, ceasefire, release of hostages, humanitarian assistance, and a clear pathway and plan for the future. I think there's increasingly consensus on the steps needed to achieve that. These are difficult days, but that only reinforces our determination to get to better days. Thank you.
هنفتح المجال لسؤالين لكل وزير.
Open the field for a couple of questions to each minister from a Dastur paper. Sara Ashrani. My question is to Foreign Minister Shoukry. This is the 3rd meeting that gathers 6 Arab foreign ministers that are very active in the Palestinian issue with the U.S. Secretary of State. After all of these meetings, can you tell us or inform us on the areas of agreement and points of differences that exist, and what about the long-term view regarding the Palestinian cause? I believe that there is a lot of consensus. There is an agreement that ceasefire is important, the release of hostages as well as their point for consensus, and of course the surge and increase of humanitarian aid to Gaza, taking into consideration the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza. I believe these are all points of agreement. There is also consensus regarding the need to avoid any escalation in Rafah and the total rejection of the displacement of Palestinians from their lands. All of these are points of consensus. We're now working on the mechanisms on how to achieve that, and we want to get past that stage to look into the long-term solution again through the 2-state solution. but we're working now on the existing problems. We want to solve them, and we want to end this state for Tad violence, and we want to make sure that the upcoming generations will live in peace, security, and stability. We want to put mechanisms, and we want to execute solutions for the current problems so as to reach the long-term solutions. And Arab countries and the United States have a joint vision regarding a region that would enjoy security and stability. But it's not only about agreeing on the goal, it's about how to implement mechanisms to reach that goal. Another question from Reuters.
محمد حميدة من BBC.
Reuters here. Since they see it هنا قدام. The front. That's right.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, Foreign Minister. Mr. Secretary, you mentioned Doha while talking about ceasefire talks. Can you confirm CIA Chief Bill Burns is going to be there? And do you think these talks are now in final stretch? You also talked about your meeting with Saudi Crown Prince. What progress exactly have you made? Are we close to having a U.S.-Saudi civil defense pact and cooperation on civil nuclear agreement? What are the remaining sticking points? And on Rafah, Israel's strategic minister Ron Dermer in a podcast said Israel will take control of Rafah even if it leads to a potential breach with the United States. These comments, like many more comments that we've heard over the last couple of months, are in complete contradiction with U.S. stance. And you're going to Israel tomorrow. I feel like I've asked you this question many times, but I'll try again. How will you convince an ally that knows there won't be any serious consequences, even if it ignores U.S. warnings repeatedly? Mr. Foreign Minister, would Egypt allow Hamas members to go through its territory to depart for third-party countries? And separately, U.S. has withheld $85 million of military aid to Egypt last year, saying it has concerns over its human rights track record. How do you feel that U.S. seems unwilling to use the same leverage to Israel? Does that double standard bother you? Thank you.
Thank you, Meryl. Let me again thank you also for getting in all of your colleagues' questions too. First of all, on Doha, I can't speak to the CIA director's schedule. I can speak to the fact that he's been doing an extraordinary job in working with our counterparts from Qatar, from Egypt, as well as from Israel, in trying to get to an agreement on a ceasefire with the release of hostages. The teams are working every single day on this. As I said, there's still real challenges. We've closed the gaps, but there are still gaps. So I can't put a timeline on it. I can just say that we're committed to doing everything possible to reaching an agreement, and that work is ongoing as we speak. And I also had an opportunity during this trip meeting with counterparts from Egypt and from Qatar to help pursue that effort. With regard to Saudi Arabia, what I can tell you is this is something, the normalization plan that we've been working on for many months. In fact, we were working on this intensely before October 7th. And in fact, I was scheduled to come to the region, to Saudi Arabia and to Israel on October 10th, precisely for that reason, and to actually focus on the Palestinian component of the normalization plan. But in terms of where we are now, what I can say is this: we've made very good progress, especially over the last month or so. We still have some work to do, but I believe that, again, the progress is good, it's real. I can't put a time frame on it, but we are, I think, getting close to a point where we'll have agreements. On Rafah, again, we've been very clear, President Biden's been very clear that a major ground operation in Rafah would be a mistake and something that we can't support. There is no place for the many civilians who are massed in Gaza, in Rafah, excuse me, to go to get out of harm's way. And for those that would inevitably remain, it would be a humanitarian disaster. But there's also a false choice involved here, because we are determined, as Israel is, and indeed, as other partners in the region are, to deal with the ongoing problem posed by Hamas, a threat to so many. And Hamas can be effectively dealt with without a major ground operation in Rafah. And one of the reasons that we have counterparts from the Israeli government coming to Washington next week is precisely to focus on that, to share with them our views on what alternative actions could be that would deal with with this very significant problem, but in a way that does not do further harm to civilians.
Well, related to the question about Hamas, which is purely speculative, I have no knowledge and or information pertaining to the fact that any such arrangements are under consideration either in the Doha or Egypt rounds of discussions on cessation of hostilities and a release of hostages and detainees. So it's not something that I would comment on, but I would only reiterate that Egypt will do whatever is possible, whatever is required to facilitate cessation of hostilities and an end to the military activity for the purpose of the security of the Palestinian civilians that have lost so many lives, the children and women that have been killed during these 5 months, and thereby we will continue to engage actively on all fronts related to the resolution of this conflict. Related to the issue of Egypt's assistance program with the United States, this is a bilateral matter, and we have in-depth discussions which addresses all of the various parameters and of the assistance program, and we have a deep understanding and discussion that facilitates that we continue to address this issue in terms of the mutual interest that this assistance program represents to both countries. On the more broader issue of double standards, yes, we are concerned that the world rule-based order is under severe stress because of a perception and an application of double standards as relates the Palestinian cause in comparison to other conflicts in the world, whether in terms of humanitarian, in terms of human rights, in terms of cessation of hostilities, which has always been the basic principle of international order, is that in any conflict there should be an immediate cessation and halt to military activity and resolution of a conflict through diplomatic channels. So the moral basis upon which we can rely on a world order are being strained currently because of a sense in many quarters, among them ourselves, many of our Arab and Muslim colleagues, is that there is an application of a double standard, and this should be recognized as a severe challenge to our ability to work together, to continue to cooperate on a predictable set of principles that should govern all of our actions.
أستاذة رندا أبو العزم من العربية، اتفضلي.
مساء الخير سعادة معالي الوزير. أنا سؤالي للوزير سامح شكري وأيضا للوزير أنتوني بلينكن. يعني احنا بنسمع تكرارا وحتى مجرد يعني استمعنا بالأمس أيضا عن حديث للحكومة الإسرائيلية ومن نتنياهو.
Speech from the Israeli government and from Netanyahu's bureau that the time is nearing the invasion of Rafah, and these policies establish an intention to displace Palestinians. My question to Mr. Shoukry is, have you seen any change in the U.S. policy towards Israel? And my question to Mr. Blinken is, do you intend, if Israel invades Rafah indeed, to stop the exporting of weapons to Israel like Canada did and like Germany is warning of? Because these weapons are killing civilians. And we know that more than 32,000 civilians, 70% of them at least, women and children, have been killed by these weapons. So do you intend to stop the exporting of weapons to Israel instead of just denouncing? The Rafah is very important indeed. I will not speak on behalf of Secretary Blinken, but I want to go back to President Biden's statements where he expressed his total rejection of a full military operation in Rafah because of the dangers this holds on the dire humanitarian situation and on the potential displacement of Palestinians from Gaza and the liquidation of the Palestinian cause and throwing this weight to neighboring countries like Egypt and Jordan. And this, of course, will cause a lot of complications in the relations in the region and will put a lot of political pressures on the possibility of a joint cooperation to face the existing challenges and to achieve the legitimate goals of the Palestinian people. So I will let Secretary Blinken to talk now, but I think that we agree on the danger of the situation and the potential invasion of Rafah, and we all must work together to stop that from happening.
Look, I can only repeat that our position, which is very clear, is that a major military operation in Rafah would be a mistake, something we don't support, and it's also not necessary to deal with Hamas, which is necessary. We're going to have an opportunity next week to share in detail that view with our Israeli counterparts and to lay out our views on how to deal with the problem differently. So I don't want to get ahead of that. That's what we're focused on in the coming days.
But no military assistance will be stopped?
I'm not going to get into
Shoukry.
hypotheticals
Shoukry.
about the future. We're focused on the present, which is meetings that we plan next week, again, to make clear why we think it would be a mistake to engage in major military operations in Rafah, but also why there's a false choice involved. It is possible and indeed necessary to deal with the ongoing threat posed by Hamas, but without a major military operation. That's what we want to discuss with our Israeli counterparts next week.
سؤال أخير تفضل مايكل from Washington Post.
Thanks a lot. Michael Birnbaum from the Washington Post. Secretary Blinken, you spent today talking about post-conflict plans. Could you tell us a little bit about the gaps that remain in your work? And also those plans all depend on Israel's willingness to agree to a Palestinian state eventually. Prime Minister Netanyahu has a long history of extreme skepticism. There are others in his cabinet who seem totally opposed. So what is your strategy for convincing the Israelis to agree to this, given that they have a track record during this conflict of rejecting most of your very big proposals? And then a question about aid and your work there. You're building the pier. You're doing these airdrops into Gaza. You're saying that the Gaza need for humanitarian assistance is greater than in Afghanistan and Sudan. At the same time, U.S.-sourced weaponry is creating that need for aid. So it seems a little paradoxical. How do you resolve that paradox for Americans and for the Palestinians you say you're trying to help? And Minister Shoukry, We just heard you restate your position. We also heard Secretary Blinken say that Palestinians should not be displaced from their land. We know the history behind your concerns, but at the same time, you also just mentioned double standards. In other conflicts, refugees commonly flee the conflict. They go into neighboring countries. They seek safety in their neighbors. A large portion of the residents of Gaza are starving, and you in Egypt are in a unique position to help save lives. So I just wanted to ask why you won't do it in this case. Thanks a lot.
Michael, thank you. Try to take on all these questions. There are, as I said, there's a lot of consensus on, first of all, the most urgent issues, but there's also a lot of consensus on where to go going forward, including for post-conflict Gaza, and including for how to build an enduring and lasting peace. We had an opportunity today to discuss in some greater detail post-conflict Gaza, including questions of security, administration and governance, development, and we also talked about what would be necessary for lasting and enduring peace, and I think in our shared judgment, that includes a Palestinian state with security guarantees for Israel. So I think on the big principles, we have very much a shared approach. Now, obviously the details matter. We shared some thoughts today. We're looking very carefully at what our partners have suggested. They're taking into consideration some of the things that we put on the table, and we're going to continue these discussions, these talks, because even as we're dealing with the immediate crisis and the urgency that comes with that, we also have to be prepared and planning together for what comes next. When it comes to a Palestinian state, look, in this moment, given the passions, given the horrific events of October 7th, given the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza these last 5 months, I know it's hard for people to focus on the future and how to get out of this endless cycle of terrorism and violence, death, destruction. But it's important that we be working on that, so when the moment is right and people can begin to focus on it and really focus on the choice that's there. And I think the choice is clear. As I've said before, there is a path forward where Israel is genuinely integrated into the region. Its security is guaranteed. The Palestinians have the state that they deserve and are entitled to, with appropriate security guarantees for Israel. We have a reformed and strong Palestinian Authority to engage in governance. And that path is both clear and it's possible. And what's changed recently is the commitment of virtually every country in the region to really pursue the integration of Israel into the region. But that also requires that there be a pathway to a Palestinian state, and of course it requires that there be an end to the conflict in Gaza. So we need to continue to do the work, and when people are able to focus on that path versus the alternative, which, as I said, is a path that leads to endless cycles of violence, and also a path that is to the benefit of perhaps the biggest threat to Israel and to many others, which is Iran and its various proxies. The perpetuation of this cycle only benefits Iran and the proxies that are working for it. So I think as that choice is clear, people will begin to really think about it and make decisions. Finally, the paradox that you alluded to. Look, we're committed to Israel's right to defend itself and to making sure that it has what it needs to defend itself and to make sure that October 7th never happens again. We're also committed to doing everything we possibly can to help people who are in harm's way, to protect them from harm if we can, and to give them the assistance they need wherever they are, including in Gaza. These are distinct things, and you've heard our determination, our shared determination among all of the partners about the urgency of getting more assistance to more people more effectively.
Well, thank you for your question. This is certainly, the conditions are unprecedented and are incomparable to any other conflict that has erupted in the world, or how it has been dealt with, or the reactions of the international community towards what is happening. But at the same time, I think the vast majority of Palestinians, both in Gaza and in the West Bank, recognize that there is potentially an intention to liquidate the Palestinian cause, the Palestinian rights, by the issue of displacement, by actions that will create internal and external displacement. And they don't want a further Nakba. They are associated for centuries to this land. They are committed to maintain their position on this land, and they have shown a resilience that has gone beyond anything other than the mere courageousness of recognizing their legitimate rights and upholding them, whether they do not find the necessary resolve within the international community to recognize that their human rights are as precious as anyone else's, and that the circumstances that they are in should not exist in the 21st century, should not exist by virtue of the Charter of the United Nations on the rule-based order that we seem to advocate. But at the same time, Egypt has undertaken its responsibility in terms of the provision of assistance, almost 70% of it generated by the Egyptian government, by the Egyptian non-governmental organizations, and at the same time, the reception of multitudes of Palestinians, civilians, children, women, babies who have been transferred into Egypt for hospitalization and for treatment. And we will continue to address this issue in the humane manner that we have in the past, whether it's related to those who are coming out for need of assistance, for their vulnerability. And you should be in a position as the media to ask, why is the media restricted from reporting effectively what is happening and being in Gaza and reporting on what is the actual state of the humanitarian conditions that exist. We'll do everything possible, and again, it is that we look to work together with the United States so that we can end this conflict both in the short term and hopefully resolve this conflict categorically in the future on the basis of a two-state solution. I want to thank Tony for the time he has provided us, and to wish everyone here a blessed Ramadan. Kul aam wa antum bi khair. Thank you very much.